We will get started in about 1 minute. Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to get going. Thank you very much for coming to this webinar tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about an overview of the college process. My name is Mary Pat O'Neill. I'm an independent college counselor in Redmond, and all that simply means is that I work with families and high school students on the college admissions process. And back in 2016, I started volunteering with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation and created the Find Your Fit program with them. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity because I think that there's a lot of inequality in education, and this is my way of giving back to the community. So we'll get started on this. I always have technical difficulties. I don't know why. Let's see, there we go. Okay. All right, so the format for tonight, this event is being recorded and it will be sent to everybody who signed up to attend. The Lake Washington Schools Foundation will be sending it out. It usually comes out within a day or two. It will also be available on the Lake Washington Schools Foundation website. So if you know somebody who you think would benefit from hearing the information tonight, let them know about it. It's also on YouTube. I always laugh that I'm a YouTube star now. There will be handouts that will be sent out with the recording, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm doing this alone in my office, so I don't have anybody moderating the questions for me, and I'm not coordinated enough to be able to read questions and the PowerPoint at the same time. So the questions will be held until the end, but I'm happy to stay as long as you have questions for me. And tonight's presentation, I'm assuming most of you who are here tonight, you've got some questions about the college process. And so this is an overview. I do other presentations like a College 101, a college boot camp that's a lot more in depth. This is really just skimming the surface. So I want you to understand that there's a lot more information I could talk about. But a few things that I always want students and parents to remember, that this is not a one-size-fits-all process. It's one of the reasons why I love my job so much is everybody's different. You're going to hear me say that multiple times. And what's right for one student is not going to be the same thing that's right for another. And that's okay because there are multiple paths after high school. Oftentimes when I'm asked questions, I have to answer with the response, it depends on the college, because there's so many different colleges. Everybody does things differently. You're going to hear me talk about what colleges look at, but it ultimately depends on the college. There's a lot of different factors that go into deciding what college is the right choice for a student. And I'm a firm believer that it's not where a student goes that's important, but it's what the student does in college that makes all the difference in the world. I happen to be somebody who loves data. I sprinkle it throughout all of my presentations. I use it all the time because it's facts. And I think it sometimes takes some of the emotion away from the college process, which tends to be, filled with a lot of anxiety and stress. And what I hope tonight is that you have an understanding of the process. I often joke that it's not rocket science, because if it was, I couldn't help anybody with it. But I'm hoping that tonight I just make it manageable and understandable and give you some resources for yourself. And then, maybe later on you'll want to attend some of the other sessions that I do where I go a lot more in depth. So I'm going to start with some data here. So in the United States, there's a little over 1,900 four-year public and private colleges. And the thing I always want everybody to understand is that about 80% of the colleges in the United States accept at least half the applicants, and that includes the University of Washington. Okay, so try not to get too hung up on the acceptance rate of a college. There's such wonderful colleges that accept more than 4% or 5% of the colleges. And so, sometimes I'll, put colleges on a student's list and they're like, oh, it's like, hey, you're smart. You should have a lot of colleges who want to say yes to you. about 1.5% of high school students will receive a full ride scholarship to college. That is sometimes parents are surprised because they might have a student with really good grades and test scores, but the U.S. system is a little different than other countries might be, and only a very few number of students actually get a full ride to college. This is about athletics. 7% of high school athletes will play a varsity sport in college. 2% will play for NCAA Division I, and 2% of high school athletes will receive athletic scholarships. So again, hey, being an athlete is a golden ticket, but just like Willy Wonka, there aren't a lot of them. So, just keep that in mind when it comes to the sports. Okay, so there are three basic different types of colleges in the United States, and I'm going to explain each of them. And the reason why it's really important to understand the different types, because the type of college will drastically impact the admissibility of the college, and it also impacts the cost of the college. So the first one I want to talk about, and this is going to be one of the handouts that you get, so you don't have to take notes if you don't want to, but the first one is the in-state public university. We live in Washington State University, or Washington State, and there are 6 in-state public universities in Washington State. They are the University of Washington, Washington State, Western Washington, Central Washington, Eastern Washington, and Evergreen State College. Now, because a student is a resident in Washington, they get priority admission. And again, just using some data, in 2020, 81% of the students admitted to the University of Washington, 81% of them were Washington State residents. So students who live in the state, they get priority admission. The second thing is we pay property taxes in Washington State, and property taxes fund education. So because of all the property taxes that have been paid, students who are residents in the state of Washington, they get a big discount at those 6 in-state schools. Now, it's still expensive, but compared to the other 2 types of colleges, you might think, wow, yeah, that really is a big discount. So just to give you kind of an idea, Washington, or University of Washington and Washington State this year, it's about $12,000 roughly for tuition. That's not room and board, that's just tuition. The other schools like Central and Western, Eastern, I think they're about $7,000 or $8,000 for, again, just for tuition. So keep those numbers in mind. The second category of schools is the very tricky one, and it's the out-of-state public university. This could be UCLA, Purdue, Michigan, University of Oregon, Montana State. So first of all, let's keep in mind, and I have to speak very generally here because I'm talking about 49 other states. But first of all, you're not a resident in that state because you live in Washington. So you've lost that priority admission. The second thing, because you're not a resident in the state, you haven't paid those property taxes. So you've lost the discount. And again, this is where it depends on the college, but generally speaking, you might see tuition maybe as low as $20,000 a year. Again, that's just tuition, not room and board, to as high as about $45,000 a year. Again, generally speaking, schools that have the word state in them are typically less expensive than colleges that have the word university. So San Diego State is much less expensive than the University of California, San Diego. So there's a couple of different things with these out-of-state universities. So the first thing I always tell families and students that they have to do is pay attention to the percentage of out-of-state students that a school accepts. And I'm speaking more about the more well-known, the popular ones like UT Austin, UCLA, University of Georgia, things like that. So you have to pay attention because, again, it depends on the state. There are some states, Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Oregon, Utah, there's not a lot of people in those states. So it's relatively easy for students to be admitted to out-of-state colleges, the public colleges in those states. And if a student happens to be very bright and have good grades and things like that, those colleges might say, hey, out-of-state student, not only do we want to admit you, we will give you scholarship money. There's other states, California, Texas, that they have a lot of people in those states, and they tend to be pretty protective of their state schools, because think about it, parents get mad when they've paid property taxes and their kids can't get into the colleges that they've paid all the taxes for. So a school like UCLA is very difficult to get into, even if you live in the state of California, but it's even harder for out-of-state students. So just to give you, again, in 2020, about 14% of the students who applied to UCLA were accepted. Again, so it's not that many. That means 86% of them were rejected. But of the 14% who were admitted, only about 12% of them come from outside of the state of California. So you can see where, yeah, it doesn't mean kids don't get in, but it's a lot more difficult. UT Austin is another one. My students will say, oh, but Mary Pat, they accept 36% of the students. And I say, yes, but they only accept 6% of the students from outside of the state of Texas. Texas is very protective of their schools. So you got to pay attention to that. There are some out-of-state publics that will give scholarship money to students. And then there are some that say the only reason we're admitting you is because we want all that extra money that a student would have to pay. So again, just stuff to pay attention to. And then the final category of schools is what's called a private university. This might be something like Stanford, Seattle U, Gonzaga, Tulane, Vanderbilt School, Boston University. They're private. They're not funded through taxes. So geography doesn't really come into play necessarily. And sometimes students will say, oh, they're too expensive, I won't even consider them. Again, depending on the school, they're no more expensive typically than an out-of-state public, but there's a lot of private colleges that will give scholarship, what's called merit scholarship, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, that will give students scholarship money to entice them to come because they know they're competing against the in-state schools. So anyways, those are the three different types of colleges, and it's important to understand the differences because it does make a big difference. And I just like to show this. I'm not really going to go into detail, but I just wanted, college is really expensive. I've got two adult children of my own who've gone through undergrad. One's completed a master's, one's in the middle of a doctorate. It just keeps getting more and more expensive. And this is just to show you the annual cost. You can see there's UW, and with room and board, you're looking at about $26,000. The schools that have asterisks after their name, I did that because they are known for being generous with scholarship money. Like Gonzaga gives really good scholarship money. Colorado State is what's called a WUI school, and I'll explain that in a second. And then I put Bellevue College on there because you can see the huge price difference. And for a lot of students starting off at a community college and trying to figure things out maybe for a year or two can make a lot of sense. So there are 5 possible things that a college will ask for in a college application. And what I mean by that is, as I said, there's over 1,900 four-year public and private schools. There are some schools who are only going to ask for one thing. Some ask for 2, some ask for 3, some ask for 4, and some ask for 5. My life would certainly be easier if everybody would just ask for the same information. My students' life would be easier too, but I just want you to understand what's to come. So the one part that is never an option, this is always going to be asked for, is a student's high school transcript. And it makes sense. And quite frankly, this is probably one of the things that's weighed the heaviest in the admissions process because it's a student's track record, so it makes sense. For most schools, it's going to be a student's cumulative GPA, which starts in 9th grade. In Washington State, our public high schools use unweighted GPAs. And all that means is for classes of rigor, which would be like an AP class or an IB class, my kids went to Eastlake. If they took AP Calc and they got an A in the class, it's still a 4. If a student goes to a school where they do weight GPA, and in other states, they do weight GPA, an A would be a 5 instead of a 4. But again, we don't weight on college applications. Students are asked, is this a weighted GPA or unweighted GPA? If a college wants a weighted GPA, they have a very quick calculator. They do it all the time. They just go through and they recalculate a student's GPA. So don't ever worry about that. one of the things that colleges like to know, and again, it depends on the college on how they're going to find this out, but there's what's called a secondary school report on high schools, and it's basically a report card on the high school. So I'm going to use Eastlake as my example since my kids went there. But the secondary school report would say there's this many thousands of students. This is the demographic breakdown of the students at Eastlake. This is the percentage of students who after graduation go to a 4-year college, a 2-year college, or the military. This is the percentage of students who get free and reduced lunch at Eastlake. These are the average ACT and SAT scores of students at Eastlake. And then finally, what they do is they list the classes of rigor. And again, rigor classes depends on the high school. At Eastlake, it would be honors, followed by UW in the classroom, followed by AP classes. If I was doing this at Skyline, it would be the IB, honors and then IB classes. If I was at Interlake, they have honors, they have AP, and they have IB. So again, it depends on the school. And the reason why colleges want to know this is they don't want to penalize students for not taking classes of rigor, because there are students in Washington State who attend high schools that don't have regular calculus, let alone AP calculus or AP calculus BC. But if a student had a class offered to them and they never took any, there are a number of colleges, and I'll tell you, UW is certainly one of them, where they go, we don't think so highly of your GPA because you didn't make the most of the opportunities that were there. Now, some students and parents will hear this and say, oh my gosh, you have to take every AP class imaginable. I am not saying that. I totally, generally speaking, I do not encourage that, because one of the things that I try to watch is a student's mental health, and students who try to overdo it on rigor classes often have a lot of mental health issues that they have to deal with. So what I always encourage students to do is, if you're interested in math or engineering or computer science, well, yes, you should push yourself in the math classes and maybe physics and things like that. If you're somebody who says, wow, I love the humanities, I love English and history, okay, well, push yourself there. So just anyways, just pay attention to that, and just know that your grades do matter. Sometimes 9th and 10th graders don't realize that their grades matter. And again, I don't know that everybody here is from Lake Washington, but I do want to remind students is that there is no A- in Lake Washington. It goes from an A to a B+, which is a 0.7 drop in GPA. I can't tell you the number of times kids are like, oh, I thought that was a 3.7. No, a 3.7 is an A-, and we don't have those. So pay attention to your grades, because if you're pretty close to that A, you don't want to wait till the day before the end of the semester to ask if there's anything you can do. Do what you can to keep that drop from happening. Okay, standardized testing. This is the area that has changed the most because of COVID. So first of all, there's 2 standardized tests that colleges have looked at. One is the ACT and the other is the SAT. Sometimes people think that colleges have a preference between one or the other. They don't. Okay, they're very similar tests. They're different, but they're similar. So colleges they don't care. There's no preference. They are meant to measure what a typical junior in high school knows. So if you're a 9th grader and you're trying to prepare for the SAT, or even a 10th grader, please don't be doing that. Okay, it is meant to measure what a junior knows. Now, if you're a 10th grader and you took the PSAT, that's great. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But these are meant to measure what a junior knows, and there's a variety of reasons for that. So even if you're super smart and you're like, I'm going to get a head start on it, if you're super smart, you're going to be even smarter in junior year. So just hold off on that. Now, because of COVID, many colleges went test optional or test blind for the class of 21, and they are continuing for the class of 22. Going forward, I'm assuming that most of you are class of 23 or beyond. Again, the numbers are shaking out. Colleges are just starting to kind of release their information, and it's one of those things where they're starting to say, okay, well, of all the students we admitted, this percentage of students submitted test scores, and in this percent we admitted this, so as college counselors, we're just starting to get the information out. And kind of the message that we're starting to get is that it's not whether or not for a student to take the test, it's whether or not they should submit their scores. And that is very, very different than if I was doing this meeting fall of 2019. If a student said, oh, Mary Pat, do I have to take it? Yeah, I'm so sorry, you have to take it. Whereas now, again, some kids test well, some kids don't test well. And there's more than just standardized test scores and grades that colleges look at. And one of the things that a student can do to determine whether or not they should submit their scores is how do their scores compare to that of admitted students? And the rule of thumb is if it falls into the 50th percentile, you should submit them. But if it's below the 50th percentile and they're test optional, you wouldn't want to submit them because it's not going to help you at all in the admissions process. And the University of Washington, our public schools, they're not looking at test scores. So in the University of California schools, they're not looking at test scores. Cal State, they're not looking at test scores. So there's a lot of schools where they simply are not looking at test scores right now. But what happened when colleges went test optional last year and test blind, it created a huge increase in applications, especially at the more selective schools. Because for a lot of students, they're like, oh, I don't need test scores. I've got a strong GPA. I'm gonna apply. So it was pretty crazy what happened last fall. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year. I always say I don't have a crystal ball. I just like to look at the numbers. So I always like to remind families and students that this is not a transactional process. And what I mean by that is, yes, a student's grades are certainly weighed heavily. And again, for some schools, test scores is going to be something that they really would like. But what I mean by transactional based, in many other countries in the world, to get into college, it is transaction. It is purely based on a student's grades, factored by a test score. It equals a sum. That 0.000 difference in test scores is what determines what school a student gets to get into. The US system does not work that way. All right. It is not transaction based. And that's why, again, I love my job so much, because I like the transformation that happens with students. And I'll throw out my Stanford data at you. So again, back in 2020, about 47,000 students applied to Stanford, and 45,000 of them were rejected. And 70% of the students who were rejected had 4.0 GPAs, had taken pretty much every class of rigor that their high school offered, and they also had perfect SAT scores, and it wasn't enough. So that's the data part, and we'll be talking more about that too. So let's see if I can get up here. So again, I like data, and this isn't to make anybody feel bad or anything like that, but I think sometimes when you hear, oh, a school has a 5% acceptance rate, they go, oh, okay, well, that's fine. But these are just numbers. These are from 2020. Okay, like let's look at Brown. 46,000 students were, applied. You can't see, there we go. Now you can see the rejected column, and 44,000 were rejected. MIT, 33,000 applied, 31,000 rejected. And, you can look at the numbers, you see them there. And it's not that students aren't qualified. Admissions officers say, yeah, about 90% of the kids who apply would do great. Okay. What the term highly selective means is that too many qualified students are applying for schools that have too few of spots. So, so yes, your grades are important. Test scores could be important and they might not be, but there's, again, remember 80% of colleges in the United States accept at least half the students who apply. So what are some of the other things colleges look at? A student's high school activities. Excuse me. And I get all excited when we talk about activities. So this is a working document. So those of you who are high school students, if you've not started this, please start it. All right. It's just a working document. What basically colleges want to know, starting in 9th grade, and 9th grade technically starts the day 8th grade is over. So that summer before 9th grade counts too, is they want to know, what do you do when you're not in school and you're not doing homework? Okay, that's what they want to know. And on your college application, they ask you for that information. And I'll show you the categories and we can talk about them in a second. But the other thing that they want to know, in addition to what do you do when you're not in school and you're not doing homework, they want to know the hours per week that you do things and the weeks per year of your involvement. And then they want students to take these activities and put them in order of importance to the student, not to the college, but they want to know what's the most important thing. Now, I'm going to show you a list of categories, but I always want students to know, yes, can they be high school activities, through your high school? Absolutely. Can they be through the community? Yes, indeed. But they can also be things that you do, maybe you write poetry, or maybe you've taught yourself how to build things, or maybe you've taught yourself code, or maybe you take care of your little brother because your parents work, or whatever it is. They just want to know, what do you do? What do you do? Again, video games, unless you're creating them, you probably don't need to put that on there. But these are some different possible categories. So they can be high school activities, but I work with a lot of kids who absolutely don't like organized high school activities. That's fine. It can be things within your community. They can be sports, but you don't have to play sports. I get asked all the time, my child doesn't play sports. Can they go to college? Yes, absolutely. They can go to college. It can be through a religious organization. Colleges differentiate between extracurricular activities and volunteer activities, and they do like to see volunteer activities. Now, again, that does not mean you have to go, do something 40 hours a week, but maybe your family likes to hike, or maybe you want to clean up a park, or maybe, if you like sports, maybe you volunteer to coach a kids team or something like that. But they do like to see volunteer activities. You can have a job. Jobs are great. You can show any hobbies that you have, or special interests. Maybe you do arts, or or you cook, or things like that. And then if you've been given any awards, that can also be on there. And to me, the students that I've worked with who really shine, maybe all my students have their own way of shining, but the ones who, the ones who are, have their eye on the big name prizes, the ones who tend to get into those schools are the kids who find an activity, and maybe they do it, 9th and 10th grade. And then, and this is always hard for me to describe, but they're involved, they enjoy it. And you should only do activities if you enjoy it. Like if your stomach hurts and you're like, oh, I have to do this to look good to a college. Oh my gosh, please don't do any activity to look good to a college. Do it because you enjoy it, and it's authentic. But let's say they're doing an activity and they might see a need someplace, like, wow, I've been doing this for 2 years and I see a problem that needs to be solved, or something that nobody's ever done. I want to do that. And those are the kids who can kind of like, jump off something and kind of create something of their own. Those are the kids who tend to really do well, and they enjoy it because they're following their authenticity. So parents always say, if your kid's interested in something, they'll be like, oh, why do you do that? Like, support them. Say, okay, well, or if they say, I'm interested in, maybe I want to do this as a career. Well, find somebody who does that as a career. Maybe your child can job shadow. And again, let just kids explore. These kids are amazing. But this is why I think activities are so important in the college process. First of all, so there are some colleges, not all, but there are some colleges that have what's called direct admit programs for specific majors. Some examples of this might be like a nursing program. University of Washington is well known for its computer science and engineering. Like students are admitted directly as freshmen. And these type of programs tend to be a little bit more competitive and selective. And so what a student wants to do, let's use computer science as an example. Yes, they've probably taken AP computer science and principles and whatever, and probably taken AP Calc and Calc BC and things like that. But pretty much everybody who's applying has taken those classes. So this is where a student's activities can help prove that they deserve a spot above and beyond just taking the classes, because it shows that the student has put their time and effort into wanting to do this. Again, especially where we live, there's a lot of students who have similar data points. They have 4.0s, they might have strong test scores. And again, if everybody who's applying to these highly selective schools, if they all have those same data points, how does a college differentiate between 1A and one test score if everybody has something similar? It's going to be through their activities. And then also, and I guess for me, this is probably the biggest reason why a student should explore activities. It helps them to know if they're on the right path. And one of the stories I like to tell is a couple of years ago, I was working with a student and I was going to do an interest and skills assessment with her. And when I met her for the first time, she was interested in becoming a lawyer, which is great. And I had said to her, have you ever talked to a lawyer? And she looked at me like I was crazy because she was 16. And she said, I'm 16. Why would I ever talk to a lawyer? But her dad was sitting there and he happened to be a doctor. And I said, well, I guarantee your dad knows attorneys because he's a doctor. And I said, have your daughter talk to one. And he says, I'll do that. So when she came in to meet with me, I said, oh, before we started, are you still interested in law? And she said, absolutely not. And I said, how come? And she said, well, I talked to a lawyer, like you said, and I discovered that they have to write all the time. That this woman told me that she writes 50 pages for every case. And she goes, I hate writing. I hate it with every ounce of my being. And I said, isn't it fantastic that you can take that off your list? So anyways, encourage, it's not hard. Most adults are more than happy to talk to, somebody who's interested in what they do for a living. So parents, that's always a good thing to do. The fourth possible thing that a college can ask for on an application is a letter of recommendation. A lot of colleges don't ask for them, but there are a number that do. So again, advice for you students who are out there. I'm always amazed when I ask students, do you talk to your teachers? And again, you don't have to talk to all of them, but like if you like a class or something, and the number of times because you're like, no, I never talk to teachers. And so my advice is you may need letters of recommendation. So it's probably a good idea to get in the habit of, chit-chatting a little bit, showing, you don't have to eat lunch with them, but, teachers are human beings and it's easier to ask somebody for something if you've gotten to know them. There's there can be what's called a counselor recommendation. It's your school counselor. Sometimes kids worry about that they don't know their counselor. Generally speaking, that does not need to be a warm and fuzzy and personal letter of rec. It's more of a form type thing. Many colleges will ask for teacher recommendations. They have to have taught the student in high school. Most students are going to ask core teachers, your history, your math, your science type thing. Many colleges will also allow what's called an outside recommender. And this can be, it could be a coach, it could be your boss, it could be your grandmother. Again, it depends on the college and what category of recommendations that they allow. And most colleges prefer to see junior or senior year teachers. Most students ask junior year because most applications start being due in November, and it can be hard to ask a senior teacher at that point. But so I'll talk about this when we go through a timeline, but I generally encourage juniors toward around April is a good time just to get them lined up and to ask teachers, because teachers do not have to write letters of recommendation. It is above and beyond their job description, and they're very difficult to write. They take a lot of time and effort. And then the final piece of the puzzle for a college could be a college essay. And that's what I'm certainly involved in big time right this time of year. But there certainly are colleges that don't have any essays required. And there are students who create their college list that way. There's nothing wrong with that. College essays are often weighed pretty heavily in admissions, like at the University of Washington. They weigh essays pretty hard, pretty heavily, along with the students' grades and the rigor. This is where a student's activities and experiences can really shine and give students things to talk about. And a student's goal is to tell a story that they're the only person in the world who can tell it, which sounds intimidating, but it's a lot easier than you might think. Find Your Fit, we always do essay workshops also during the school year. The time to start them is the summer before junior year. So when you're a rising senior, like I said, I do these workshops, and sometimes juniors, rising juniors, I'm like, no, just go have activities so you have something to talk about next year when you're writing them. So don't start these too early. And there's what's called personal statements and supplemental essays. It just, some kids have one essay they have to write. Some kids might have 25 essays. It will totally depend on a student's college list. But before you can know, do I need letters of rec? Do I need test scores? Do I need essays? A student has to know where they're applying to college, because otherwise, you could be you could be writing a college essay and then find out, I don't need one. So the first thing a student needs to figure out is where they're going to apply to college. And again, remember, this is just a quick overview tonight, but Nobody has ever said to me, Mary Pat, find me a bad college. Everybody wants to go to a good college, and that's what I want too for my students. So how can you tell if a college is good? Well, I pay attention, again, I like the data. I look at a 4-year graduation rate. The government requires the 6-year to be published, but colleges also publish the 4-year graduation rate. And again, as a parent myself, I know I said to my student, my kids, I want you out in 4 years because this is really expensive. So my rule of thumb is when you look at graduation rates, I like to see it at least 50%. And you might think, really? But trust me, 50% is a good number, or higher. There's a lot of schools that have higher graduation rates. And if it's lower, never hesitate to ask a college, why is your graduation rate less than 50% for 4 years? And there can be a multiple number of reasons. A common reason can be that there are a number of colleges that have what's called co-op programs. And this just simply means that as part of the graduation requirement for the college, a student typically will have to work 2 semesters in their field. So let's say they're computer scientists or engineers or biology students or something, like they're going to work and get paid for doing a job in their field. And typically you don't pay any tuition during this time, but a student can't graduate within 4 years because they have this obligation, this co-op obligation. And typically what happens is that whoever they do the co-op with, oftentimes they're hired after graduation, but it certainly makes them more employable after graduation because they have all this practical experience. So co-ops can be great. Oregon State, Purdue, Cal Poly, Northeastern, University of Cincinnati, Georgia Tech, they're Rochester Institute of Technology, they're all big co-op schools. So their graduation rates can be a little bit lower, and it's because of that. Sometimes they can be overcrowded state schools, and it can just be difficult for students to get the classes that they need to graduate. It doesn't mean it's going to take 6 years, but it might take 4 years and 2 quarters. And again, it doesn't mean students don't go there, but you should have that information so that you're prepared. I always look at the retention rate, and what the retention rate is, it's the percentage of freshmen who come back for their sophomore year. And again, my rule of thumb is 80%. Again, most of the schools around here do very well, but there are some schools that I look at, and they're 70%. And I always, when I see lower numbers like that, I was like, there's a reason people aren't coming back. And you should, ask the question, why aren't they coming back? Do they have the programs offered? You don't have, at almost all colleges, a student does not have to know what they want to be, what they want to major in. That's perfectly fine. Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo is probably the one school that requires students to have a major. They're admitted by major. They can't change their major, that type of thing. But let's say you're thinking, okay, I don't know what I want to do, but maybe I want to become a nurse, or maybe I want to go to business school, or maybe I want to go into forensics. And there's some college majors like biology and political science and psychology and sociology, computer science. Most schools have those. But there are some, not all schools have engineering schools. Not all schools have nursing schools. Not all schools offer entrepreneurship or finance. And so if you, again, it's not the end of the world to transfer, but if you think you might be interested in something, make sure that they have the programs that you might want to study. Pay attention to the cost. I'm going to be talking about cost in a few minutes. College is expensive, and if it doesn't fit your budget, I don't see the point of looking at it. And then the culture is huge. I have students who are in school, who went to school in Texas, and they're not quite liking the culture of the state right now. And just, so pay attention, like, does the culture fit you? Because if it doesn't, it may not be the right place. And that's why I always say it's so important to visit a college and see them in person, because they all have different personalities. So just to talk real briefly about highly selective schools. And remember, highly selective schools, they're highly selective because they have too many qualified applicants. So, going back to my Stanford example, when I said, okay, 47,000 applied, 45,000 are rejected, so that leaves about 2,000 students. And you have to understand that oftentimes for the more selective schools, even before the admission cycle opens, a lot of those spots are taken, and they're taken through recruited athletes. especially, the big sports like, basketball and football. Sports makes a lot of money for colleges. And so though that's made a big priority. There's something called legacies. That just simply means that your parents attended a college, and at a number of colleges, the more selective, if a parent attended, the acceptance rate might be slightly higher for the student. And there's also something called endowments, and this is perfectly legal. And it would be, if I could write a $5 million check to a college, my child is probably going to look a lot more attractive to that school because I've made this big endowment. And again, it's very legal for people to do that. So so those three categories of things can take away a lot of the open spots that are available at these highly selective schools. And I always say, unfortunately, at the more selective schools, it's not transparent and it's not always fair. And, because again, there's lots of qualified students. We're going to talk about merit scholarships in a few minutes and the financial part. What a merit scholarship is, by definition, it's a tuition discount to attract a student to go to a college. And that's how a lot of colleges get smart kids to come. They're like, hey, here's the money, follow the money. Schools like this, they don't need to give tuition discounts to attract students because people are just lined up. Hey, Stanford had 47,000 people apply, and 45,000 of them were rejected. And, there's a lot of people like, I will pay whatever. So from a cost standpoint, there's usually not merit scholarship. Again, wealth is an issue, I'm a first generation myself, but there are kids who, they're, maybe their dad is the the head of a big bank, or he went to, there's just lots of connections, a lot of wealthy connections. And so those schools tend to favor that because they're businesses and they want the money. And not the biggest, but one of the big issues for highly selective schools in the Seattle area is the fact that there are so many smart high school students. We have all the tech companies who have super smart parents, who have super smart kids, and they all have the good grades. They all have the good test scores. They have these wonderful activities. I work with a lot of these kids, and I'm just amazed at the things these students do. And again, colleges, they can't take everybody. So it just, all of these things compound, and that's why I always want everybody to keep an open mind when it comes to their colleges. Yeah, sure, have a couple of reach schools, but make sure you have a bunch of schools that you'll get into, that you'll love, that maybe shower you with scholarship money because you're so bright and wonderful. So there's two different types of aid, and I am not a financial planning college counselor. I know enough, I guess, to be dangerous, but so there's need-based aid and there's merit aid. So just a couple things about need-based aid. So there's a form that comes out, the FAFSA. You might have heard it because it came out on October 1st, and everybody always gets, oh, the FAFSA's out. It's not that hard of a form to fill out, but you fill it out senior year, and you should fill it out every year that your student's in college. Again, if you're looking for need-based aid, a college's financial aid office is a great place to go to. Pay attention to the deadlines, because if you miss a deadline, you won't be able to get it. And I think it was about 2 weeks ago, Find Your Fit, I brought in a financial planning college counselor, Peg Keogh, and we did a 1-hour webinar on understanding the cost of college and how to pay less. And it was an excellent program that we did because of Peg. She knows so much, she's so knowledgeable. But that's available on the Lake Washington School Foundation website. It's on demand. So if you're interested in learning more about financial aid and all that type of stuff, that's a worthwhile webinar to watch. So let's talk a little bit more about merit scholarships. And I already said it's a tuition discount to attract students. You don't apply generally for merit scholarships. A student applies to college, and then when they get their admission letter, they'd say, congratulations, you're admitted, and on top of that, we would like to give you $20,000 a year for each of the next 4 years, or $25,000 a year, or $10,000 a year. Again, it depends on the college. Merit is usually based on a student's cumulative GPA. So again, that's a good incentive to do well in school. And again, for some colleges in the past, this was more of a thing, that test scores played a role. But last year with so many schools, or so many students not having test scores, I think only 29% of Seattle students were able to submit test scores last year, which is, everything was canceled. But anyways, sometimes test scores might play into it, but overall, right now they're not. How do you know if a college offers merit aid? Go to a school's website and type in the words merit scholarships. Now, if it's an out-of-state public, again, you don't live in that state and it's a public university, make sure you ask or type in the words non-resident, because it makes a big difference. One of my seniors was applying to a school and I knew she had a budget, and I said to her, I said, hey, if you go to their website and type in non-resident merit aid, I don't know, like 90% of it's all about residents, and they're like one little sentence, so you can tell there really wasn't any. And she's like, oh my gosh, so she took it off her list because it didn't fit her budget. So again, there are some out-of-state publics that do, and there's a lot that don't. Every college is required to have on their website what's called a net price calculator. And this is where you would put in your students' information, your household information, and it'll give you a general guideline to get an idea whether or not you would qualify for merit aid. And asking admissions is a great thing to do too. Just ask admissions. Can you tell me, I have a 3.8 GPA, I've taken a bunch of AP classes, would I qualify for anything? And they'll tell you. I find them to be pretty straightforward. There's also a category of schools called WUI schools, and it stands for the Western Undergraduate Exchange. There are 14 states. Washington is one of them, and they have agreements amongst the public schools that instead of paying what basically the out-of-state tuition is about 3 times in-state tuition. So as I said, it's pretty expensive. They have agreements that they'll pay 1.5 times. So it's a big cost savings. However, it is not all the public schools in the 14 states, like, UW and Washington State don't participate. University of Oregon doesn't participate. UCLA doesn't participate. Well, actually, most of the UCs don't participate. Not too many of the Cal State schools participate, but there are a number of schools that do. So you can go to the WUI website. Every school is different as far as the GPA that a student is required to have to qualify for WUI. I don't think anybody's requiring test scores anymore. In the past they did. And it isn't necessarily every major either. Sometimes they restrict things like at Arizona State, is a WUI school, but not for the main Tempe campus, but the other campuses are. So you have to look at the website to get all the particulars, but it is a great way to go out of state and save yourself a lot of money. So through this whole process, and I know I'm giving you a lot of information and I'm talking very fast, but keep an open mind. I say this to students, I say it to parents. You don't know. And that's why visiting colleges is so important. A lot of times families will say to me, no, it's a waste of time. It doesn't make any difference. We're going to wait until we know where we've been admitted to every place. Well, seniors can find out in April. They have to find out by April of their senior year. So March is a lot of admissions. And you have to make your decision by May 1st. So I've worked with kids who've been accepted to great colleges in a multitude of geographical areas. So it's not easy, like just to go from, I don't know, like Seattle to Portland or something. We're talking all over the United States. And if you wait to the last minute, and also visiting colleges helps students to understand, oh, I like this, or I like that, or it inspires them. Both of my children ended up attending colleges that at the beginning of their college process, they're like, just so you know, I'm never going there. And it wasn't that their dad and I said, yes, you will. It was because we said, well, we'd like you to at least take a look at it. And then when they visited the school and went on the official tour, not just walking around a campus, you don't really learn a whole lot walking around a campus and doing nothing else. They were both like, wow, I was really wrong about everything I thought about the school. And that's what happens. So you keep an open mind. And the number of times when I ask my seniors, when they've finished the process, and I ask them if they've learned anything, and they say, yeah, man, if you had told me when we started that this was the school I would pick, I would have laughed at you because I thought I knew exactly how the process was going to go. I don't know how the process is going to go. And it's just keep an open mind, because you might be surprised at all the wonderful schools that are out there. Here are some great college resources. There's a lot of good college resources, but the top two, College Board and College Data, their websites, they've got tons of information about, like majors and 50th percentile of test scores and classroom size and sports and, percentage of students in-state, out-of-state, all that kind of stuff. They're great websites. And then the bottom two are books that I use quite a bit. The FIS Guide is a book that comes out every year. You don't need to buy it every year. I do, because I get excited about it, but it's the top 300 schools in the United States. And the reports that they have on each school, they're not written by college administrators. They're not marketing pieces. They're written by students. And so I always tell students it's a great way to get a sense of what the academic atmosphere is like, the social atmosphere, what the professors are like. Is there a sports scene? Is it a party school? What's the dorm food like? What's the surrounding area? What's the weather? All that kind of information. And it can be a good way for a student to be like, oh, wow, this sounds so different than what I thought. Or they might say, they sound weird. This doesn't, that's nothing wrong with, if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. And then Admissions Matters it's just a book on admissions. But it's a very good, they talk about everything. They talk about test scores and creating a college list and athletics and, just everything under the sun. If you want to be an art major, if you want to do sports, I don't know. It's a really good resource. Both books are under $20 on Amazon. You can probably get them through the library too. So one of the handouts that you're going to get, and I know you can't read this, is a timeline. I'm constantly asked, what should my 9th grader do? What should my 10th grader do? So I'm going to go through this piece by grade with you just now, but just know you're going to get the hard copy of this. So for 9th graders, the biggest thing for 9th graders is for them to understand that their college application is starting with grades. So, do your best, much better. Try not to get too many C's, okay, or D's, because it brings down the GPA. So a student should do well academically, take classes of rigor where appropriate. And, most of the 9th graders aren't taking AP classes, but they might be taking honors classes and the classes that, that they care about. They should start their activity list. Again, it's just a working document. Have it in Google or Word and put a note on your calendar to update it twice a year so that when you're a senior, you're not sitting there going, oh my gosh, I can't remember. What did I do in 9th grade? Because I can't remember. And again, just start doing some activities that, join a club or two. Again, they don't have to stay with them forever. If you don't like a club, you can quit it. But they should start, and they don't have to be clubs, but again, find activities that you enjoy. And again, explore your curiosity. You're going to hear me say that a lot. In 10th grade, again, some of the schools, again, pre-COVID, 10th graders traditionally always took the PSAT. The P in PSAT stands for preliminary SAT. And the only reason they would have 10th graders do it is just to get them used to standardized testing. The scores, don't go anywhere. PSAT scores aren't put on college applications anyways, but it's just to get students used to that. So if you're a 10th grader and you took the PSAT, one of the things you might want to do this fall is to take a practice ACT. And then you can compare your scores. There are charts called concordance charts, where you can look at your two scores. And if one is significantly higher than the other, that's the test that you should focus on in junior year when you're preparing for testing. Again, you don't have to submit your scores, but that will give you an idea which test you're better suited for. Again, do well academically, take classes of rigor where appropriate, update your activity list, and then maybe now you start visiting colleges. And again, I want to make a big deal about it, but if you're visiting, if you're going to Disneyland, maybe you say, oh, we'll go visit Pomona, or maybe we'll go to Chapman, or something like, look and see what's nearby. Again, explore your curiosity, and then maybe start again. If you want to start focusing on ACT and SAT, you can, because once that summer hits, you are technically a junior, but just be careful about doing it too soon. Junior year is when most of the work really starts going. So again, you should take the PSAT. It's used for national merit in junior year. A very small percentage of students will actually qualify for national merit, but it's a good practice SAT test. So I'm a big believer for if you are going to do standardized tests, the more familiar that you are with the material, the better that you're going to do. So it's a great way to just to practice it. If you determine that you're going to take the ACT and SAT, and again, it's going to depend. And if you're not a strong test taker, please don't stress out about it. There's so many schools that will not care at all about your testing. Update your activity list. Again, take classes of rigor where appropriate. Start your college list. Start visiting colleges in the spring. Ask for those letters of recommendation. Again, are you applying to colleges where they might need interviews? Again, figure out, most schools don't need interviews, but there are some that do. And so if you need to do that, those are the things you want to be organized and schedule. Again, in the summer, continue to explore that curiosity, work on your college essays. You can start your Common App. You can start your Coalition App if you're applying to coalition schools, finalize your college list. And then again, if you're testing, because you can test for most students through fall of senior year. So you might still be wanting to test. And then in 12th grade, again, if you need the ACT or SAT, make sure you get that done. Follow up on your letters of rec. That's the piece that drives kids crazy. If you are testing and your colleges want official scores, some colleges say you can just self-report and then send us the official scores later. But again, depending on the college, if you need to have those scores sent, make sure you do that because it takes a couple of weeks for them to show up. Make sure you thank anybody who wrote you a letter of rec. Write them a nice note, maybe give them a cookie or something like that, because it's a lot of work for them to do that. Have your activity list updated. Complete the FAFSA or the CSS profile if appropriate. Again, taking classes of rigor, visit colleges. Again, even though you've applied, you can still keep visiting. Put off senioritis as long as possible because your grades do count senior year. And then May 1st, you're going to make your decision. So, well, got done at 8 o'clock. So I am I'm a resource in the community. I'm here. I'll answer any questions that you have now. But if ever you have a question, all you have to do is send it to findyourfit@lwsf.org. People send me questions all the time. I am a resource in the community. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. So make a note of that. And then let's see what kind of questions we have here. Okay, let's see. Someone was asking if you can see your secondary report. Sometimes you can find them online. They have different names for them. I always call it the secondary school report, but it's just the information they're not secrets. If you can't find it, I would ask your school administrators, but you can usually find it on a school's website. Yeah, the recording will be shared. Yes, the handout will have the 3 types of colleges and all that kind of stuff. Does non-resident merit-based scholarship? No. Family income is not used for merit money at all. It has nothing to do with it. Need-based, certainly, but not for merit. Does it help to track activity in 8th grade? No, they're not going to ask about it. It starts when 9th grade begins, which is when 8th grade is over. So that summer before 9th grade, you can track it. And it doesn't mean, I have kids who do wonderful things in middle school and they might write about it in their college essays, but it's not part of their high school activity list because it didn't happen in high school. How many times can the test be taken? And will only the best score be reported? I once saw a meme that said if a student takes the SAT or the ACT more than 6 times, it needs to show up as an activity list, which I thought was very funny. You can take it as many times as you want, but if you're not getting the scores that you want, it just may be that some people just don't test well. It has nothing to do with intelligence. There's just not everybody tests well. And you're asking, can you only show the best scores? It depends on the college. There are some colleges that say, we want to see every single time you've taken that test. And there's other schools that say, we will do what's called super scoring, where they just take the top scores from the top scores from the test that you've taken. So it makes a combined best score. It totally depends on the college. So college fees, I don't know what you mean by college fees. It's the tuition, there's room and board, as I said, UW, room and board and tuition, you're looking at about $26,000 a year. If you're looking at NYU, you're looking at, I don't know, over $300,000 for the 4 years. So, whatever that number is, you got to multiply it by 4. The University of California schools, they're about $65,000 a year. There's no scholarship money for out-of-state students. So you're looking at more than $250,000. So, and if you have other kids or other things you want to do with your money, it can be very, very expensive. Parent of an 8th grader, what can they do? Follow it. Just again, encourage your child to do activities that interest them, talk to people whose careers interest them, just do well in school, have good habits, and get ready for high school. How does the preparation for college change when you're doing Running Start? So Running Start, for those of you who don't know it, it's called dual enrollment. And students can take it as early as junior year. Some students wait till senior year. Some students do it part-time. What they do is they're taking community college classes in replacement of high school classes. And some students can actually earn an associate's degree by the time that they graduate from high school. So that means that they've got 90 college credits under their belt. And I'm always asked, is it considered rigor? Yes, it is. They're taking classes. Now, is it as rigorous as an AP class? That's kind of debatable. And again, a school like UW, go to their website. They love Running Start. Most of the colleges around here, they respect Running Start. They don't have an issue with it. There could be, other schools. It might not be a fan. They might not be fans of it. Like, they're over in, I don't know, Boston. They might not want. They might not even know what Running Start even means. But the thing I always tell students, I don't care that you have your associate's degree. You are still applying to college as a freshman. You have to go through everything a freshman applicant does. You are not a transfer student. Everybody thinks they're transfer students. You are not a transfer student. You are a freshman. And then once you apply to college, you're admitted to colleges, the student decides what college they're going to attend. Then what happens is after you graduate, the community college and the high school, they send their final transcript to the college, and the college will say, oh, okay. And they go through all the credits and they go, okay, Mary Pat, you are now, again, it depends on the college. It depends on the program that, like if you're an engineering student, I guarantee you there's prereqs that you did not take at Bellevue College that UW's going to require and things like that. So they might say, oh, Mary Pat, yes, you are a junior. Okay, great. They might say, oh, Mary Pat, you are a second year first quarter, or Mary Pat, you are, or if I've only done 1 year, they might say, okay, you're going to start off as a sophomore. It totally depends on the college. But a lot of kids really love Running Start. They like the flexibility. A 10-week quarter is the equivalent of 1 year of high school. So it's a great way for them to take a variety of classes. For kids who might be wanting to go to med school or something like that, it's a great way to get possibly 2 years of college paid for and done with before you go off to college. But just remember, you are a freshman, and then you might be something different once you get in. Okay, the secondary report, it's a report card on the high school. It says, this many thousands of students apply. This is the demographic breakdown of students. This is the percentage of students who get free and reduced lunch. This is the percentage of students who after graduation go to a 4-year college, a 2-year college, the military. They show average ACT and SAT scores of the students. And then they list the classes of rigor. And again, it depends on the school, but it could be AP classes, IB classes, combination of both, honors classes. But it's just basically a report card on the high school, because that's what I often get asked. Like a lot of times it's 8th grade parents in January. Oh, we're trying to decide what high school. And I say, go to the high school that's the right fit for your child. They don't know that, oh, you could have gone to this school, but you chose this school. They just look at the school that the student goes to, and they look at the opportunities, and did the student, make the most of them. And, and if there's circumstances of why a student can't do things, there's places on the college application to explain. Again, remember, this is a very, very much an overview presentation. This is just a real lightweight here. The handouts will be sent out from the Lake Washington School Foundation. I am not a school counselor, so someone's asking about college and the high school program. I mean, it depends on the high school. Like I know Eastlake has UW Comp and UW Pre-Calc and UW Calculus and UW Astronomy, and it's more rigorous, obviously, than a regular class, because it takes a quarter. So colleges work on quarter, like UW, their classes are quarters, they're 10 weeks. So they take the information that they do over the quarter in the college, but they do it over a whole school year. So it's, it's a little bit of a slower pace, but it's still, a lot of information. My own kids never did UW in the classroom, so I don't know a lot about it. You can get college credit for it. You have to pay a fee, but that's also, and so it's a great way to show rigor. It's not as rigorous as AP classes though, but it's a great way. Someone wants to know, how do you stand out? Again, this is not a one size fits all process. And man, if I could say, oh, if you do this and this and this, everything, you should encourage your student to be the best possible selves. Some are, is it easy to get internships? Some are, like, like the Microsoft ones, super competitive, but can you create an internship for us? Maybe somebody, a family friend, has a business and they can take your child. Again, let's all be real. It's always who you know. Can you ask somebody to do something for you? Or I've had kids work for their own parents and do an intern. Again, you want to be very structured, and parents don't do stuff for your child. You can do things like, oh, you want to learn about becoming an engineer. Even if you're an engineer, you're the last person your child should talk to. And it's because of you're too close, but have them go talk to the person in your office, somebody else. Or, if your daughter's interested in STEM, have her talk to other females working in the STEM field. Or, like, oh, you're really passionate that there aren't enough, you're tired of being the only girl in your STEM classes. Okay, well, what are you going to do about it? Oh, you want to start a club to encourage, elementary school, or you want to go teach something. Again, support them, help, just encourage them to do what they can above and beyond just taking classes. That's again, for some college programs, it's absolutely enough. Again, it depends on the school you're going to apply to. But if you're talking about getting into UW's computer science program, it's pretty selective. So student, yeah, do they have to have good grades? Heck yeah. Do they have to have taken hard classes? Heck yeah. But they should be doing things above and beyond. Again, I can't tell you what that is, but they should be following their curiosity and support them. So, is it okay to ask high school counselor for college admissions history? I don't know what you're asking. Like, I don't know if you're asking, is it okay to ask, like, what schools did students get into, and like from like the class of 21, like what they probably have that information. A lot of high schools do track. A lot of times they track what college the student has chosen. They may not track all the admissions, but I mean, you can certainly ask. Again, don't ever compare yourself to anybody else. Like sometimes when people are talking to me, they're like, I want to know, where your students have gotten into. And I'm like, it's not relevant because that's not your child. So, I'm not sure why you're asking that question. So the difference between weighted and unweighted GPA, as I said, in Washington State, the public high schools do not weight GPA. We use a 4-point scale. An A is, doesn't matter if it's a regular math class or English class, or if it's an AP Lang class or AP Calc class. An A is a 4, a B is a 3. A B plus is a 3.3. Remember, in Lake Washington, we don't have A minuses. Weighted GPA means that when a school is calculating a student's GPA, an A in a rigor class, which would be AP or IB, it would be a 5. I think for honors classes, it's like give it a 0.5 bump. I'm not a school counselor, and I don't work with weighted GPAs because I work with public school students. But that's the difference. But don't ever stress out about it. On college applications, they ask students, what at the time of application, what is your GPA? Is it weighted or is it unweighted? And if a college wants a weighted GPA, they have the student's transcript. It's part of the application, and they simply go through and they recalculate it if they want a weighted GPA. So do not stress about GPAs. You're asking that. Yes, you can submit both ACT and SAT scores, but that's why I say it's a good idea to, if you're going to do the testing route. And as I said, colleges, if you're the class of 23, they're still going to be test optional, most of them. So don't stress about it. Activities, your activities can mean a lot more than your test score. Okay. But if your scores are the same, then did you like one test better than the other? But if your scores, like if you take the ACT and SAT and one set of scores is better than the other, well, then you'd only submit the better scores. Like you wouldn't submit them both. So I try to minimize too many, some of these kids, it's just like testing in there. They're going to take it 6 times. Like, that's ridiculous. Just please don't put that pressure. You misinterpreted what I said. Can you explain something for a student medical? How many years? I don't know a lot about. Okay, so first they have to do their undergraduate, which is at least 4 years. Then they have to get into medical school. Most medical schools really like to see students not come directly from undergraduate. A lot of kids take a few years off. Then you have medical school, which is 4 years. And then I think, like, if you want to specialize, there's additional, again, I'm not a doctor, but that's, they say for a lot of times doctors, they don't start actually making money until their 30s because of all the schooling that they have to do. And the thing I always want to remind students is that, healthcare is a great field. And oftentimes students think that there's only 2 things that they can be, and one is a doctor and the other is a nurse, but it's very, very broad. I have 2 adult children who are both working in healthcare. One is in public health, does epidemiology, and the other one is becoming a physical therapist. So there's just, healthcare is very broad, and becoming a doctor isn't the only thing that a student can do, but it certainly, and that's where talking to doctors, and there's lots of good websites. So you want to become a doctor, and they talk about all those type of things. Do colleges weight attendance at choice schools? So a couple things. What I typically tell my students who attend choice schools like Tesla STEM, Cambridge, or ICS is, yes, your secondary school report, talks about your school, but you never really know who's reading your application, how close they're reading the application. So I always tell my students who attend those schools just to flag their school. And what I mean by that, there's a section on applications that says, it's called additional information. Hey, is there anything else about you we should know? So I'll use Tesla as an example. And I just have them say something like, I attend a lottery-based choice STEM high school in my district. It is a highly rigorous curriculum and students have very little choice in their class selection. And the same thing is true for ICS. And that's all I have them say. And the reason is, if, I didn't throw my statistics out at you, but going back to GPA, this is where knowing your GPA can be important, but using UW as an example, many families are interested in UW. If I look at 2020 admissions, 70% of admitted students to UW had a 3.75 or higher. When it drops down to 3.74 to 3.5, it's 23%. So that tells me that 93% of students admitted to UW have a 3.5 or higher. So if I was working with a student who had a 3.4 and they're like, oh, my dream is to go to UW, I have to say, well, again, I don't have a crystal ball. Looking at the data, I don't know if it's very likely, but I've had students who go to the choice schools, and that 3.4 at a Tesla or an ICS or a Cambridge can be more impressive than from another school because of the rigor of the classes. So in answer to your question, yes, it certainly can help. I remember years ago when my daughter was applying to college, and I wasn't a college counselor at the time, and she had a 3.8 GPA, which is certainly a solid GPA. And back in her day, they used to rank students, and they don't rank anymore, but they would walk around in senior year and they'd pass out this little card and everybody would be told, where they ranked in their class. And she was a little frustrated because she was like, I'm in the 75th percentile or whatever. But there were a lot of students who had 4.0s. But she said, I'm taking AP Calc, I'm taking AP Bio, I'm taking AP Chem, all this stuff. And I said to her, well, you're probably going to get admitted to colleges that they don't, because you've taken harder classes. And, again, it's not the only thing that they look at. There's grades there's, letters of rec and activities and essays and all that kind of stuff. But she did get, I remember, because, parents talk, and there were schools that she got into that kids with 4.0s weren't admitted to because they didn't take hard classes. So again, doesn't mean you have to overload, please don't, but they do pay attention to that. The recording is going to be available. Yes. You can reach me at findyourfit@lwsf.org. I already talked about that. Let's see. This must be from a student. How do I start looking for activities? Well, what interests you? This student says all they do is ski. And there's nothing wrong with skiing. Maybe you want to get a job. That can be interesting. Or look at your club list. A lot of kids have things that they care about. Maybe you care about the environment. Maybe you care about helping others. Look at your school list. Sometimes I know it can be scary to go to a club meeting for the first time. I've had students where they bribe their best friend to do that. Just come with me to the first meeting, and then I'll go to the first meeting with you, and you both may end up staying. But just try them out. Again, if you go once or twice and you're like, there's just no connection, I'm not liking it, okay, that's fine. And again, you don't have to do organized activities, but I don't know, maybe if you like skiing, maybe there's other activities you like, or maybe you want to learn how to build skis. I don't know, but you have to explore, and you have to try things. And if you don't try it, then you won't know. And asking, so back to the career thing. So, any of you who are students, if there's something that you're interested in, a career or something like that, really don't be afraid to reach out to adults who work in the field and just say, hey, I'm a high school student. I'm kind of interested. I'm here to tell you, most adults are thrilled. Oh my God, somebody wants to ask me about what I do. I would love to, love to hear it. And this is where your parents can help you. Like, if you don't know somebody, they could reach out on social media and be like, hey, my child is interested in talking to a forensic psychologist. Does anybody know anybody? And usually 6 degrees of separation. And then when again, you can do it on Zoom, you could meet them in their office, you can meet them for coffee, and just be polite and just say, you know, you can say, oh, I'm kind of nervous, and they'll understand. But just asking questions like, hey, can you tell me, how did you get from my age to what you're doing now? Okay, and just listen to them. Where did you go to school for undergrad? What was your major? Did you go to graduate school? Where? Knowing everything you know now, would you do it the same way? And a lot of times adults will be like, oh, no, I do it completely differently. What do you love about what you do? What don't you love about you do? Everybody has, there's always some part of a job that somebody doesn't like. What advice would you have for somebody my age? And again, you don't have to do it, but listen to what they have to say. And then if you hit it off with them, you're like, wow, that person's really nice, I like him a lot, to say, hey, is there any way that I could job shadow? And all job shadowing means is you sit quietly like a mouse and you observe. All right. And, you know, I always make the joke that if you're there 3 hours and it feels like 10 minutes, it's a good sign. If you're there 5 minutes and it feels like 3 hours, that might not be the job for you. But again, if you like it, you're like, wow, you know, just ask, keep asking questions. And then that's where you might be able to say, hey, this is really fascinating. Could I possibly do an internship? I mean, don't expect to be paid or anything like that. And there are tons and tons of summer activities in Seattle, you know, for science and healthcare. Again, you can, in January, start typing in the word, you know, there's WANET classes, but typing in the words like summer high school 2022 biology or 2022 computer science, just see what comes up. You know, some things fill up quickly, but there's lots of activities. Just explore. Okay. That's all I can tell you to do is, you know, if you think, wow, sounds kind of interesting. Okay, try it. And it doesn't mean you have to do, you know, make it your life dream, but you're not going to find out otherwise. Let's see. Among activities, recommendation letters, and essay, how would you rank their importance? Again, it's going to depend on the college. And in that website that I said, College Data, they actually have a little scattergram of sorts where they show what's very important, considered and not considered. Generally speaking, so grades and rigor are always going to be typically very important. Essays are typically weighed pretty heavily too in the admission process. Activities, I'd say, are important. Letters of rec for most schools are considered. They, you know, again, but you know, if you're applying to, you know, an MIT that gets 33,000 applications and they reject 31,000, when they're looking at letters of rec, like, just, I mean, I read a lot of books on admissions process and stuff like that, but there, you know, there's things like, you know, they go, oh, I can't really like the word that this teacher used. Like they're looking for reasons. They're looking for reasons to reject qualified students. And that's why I tell, you know, my students, when, you know, they hate me during the essay process because I'm so tough on them, but I have to be, because, you know, if you're just giving some bland answer, oh, why do I want to go to your school? Because the campus is beautiful and you have a good engineering program, and you know you have study abroad. It's like, oh my God, you just described most of the schools in America. So that I would say essays followed by activity. But activities are important because they give you things to write about in your essays, and that's why I love the activities so much, because they give you something to write about. And you know, sports alone is not sports aren't great things to write about in college essays. I went to ICS for a week. It's not going to be, that's interesting, for a week. Obviously it was not a good fit, and I'm glad you got out, because those choice schools are not the right fit for everybody. I'm assuming you went for 9th grade, not just like for 7th grade, or 6th grade, whenever they start. That's an interesting question, because they do. I've had students who started like at ICS in 9th grade, and maybe they went one semester. And that shows up on the transcript because they got grades. But I'm thinking, and this will be a good question to ask your counselor at your school. I don't think it does, because you don't have any grades. There's nothing that for them to track. So I'd say no, it would not. Again, could be a good choice, something to write about on your essays later on, because you knew it wasn't the good choice for you. Oh, welcome. You're welcome. Okay, let's see. Got through those. Okay, someone asked, what about the 18 months of COVID when there were no activities? Okay, I'm here to tell you there were activities. Now, not the normal activities, but a lot of kids really stepped it up and did things. So, it's possible that your child might not have done anything, but I mean, there are kids who started a blog. They taught themselves how to make masks, and they donated them to charities. There were kids who started baking, kids who learned that they really like to do art. They started painting murals in their bed. Like their activities different, yeah, the sports were gone and stuff like that, but that's actually there are tons of kids who really pivoted during COVID. So I'm sure your child did something. Is the process different for non-US citizens? Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with international students. Like, if my understanding, and these are good questions to ask admissions, my understanding is that in Washington State, you are considered, for the 6 public schools like UW and Washington State, you are considered a resident, even if you're an international student. As far as the requirements for applying to college, it's not really any different. Some colleges, they might have language requirements. They want to make sure that a student is proficient in English and stuff like that. But generally speaking, it's the same. Sometimes for merit aid, international students might not qualify, and they may not be able to qualify for need-based aid either, because they can't fill out the FAFSA because it's for US citizens. And so there's a little bit of difference, but as far as like what you need to apply doesn't really change, as far as grades and all that kind of stuff. I think I've talked about weighted and unweighted GPA. Do you know where we can get the handbook mentioned? What handbook? I don't know what handbook I mentioned. Like at the end, I talked about the FIS guide and the admissions matters. The library has them, and you can also buy them on Amazon for about $20 a book. Okay. I've talked twice now about unweighted GPA. I'm not talking about it again. Okay, someone was asking about students with learning differences. I would guesstimate about 1/3 of the students I've worked with have some sort of learning differences. Usually ADHD has been pretty common. I've had students with dyscalculia and some other things too. So colleges do not have to support, provide services for students with learning differences or any, physical disability. They're not required to, but most do. And so one of the things that, obviously you have to make sure that your paperwork is all up to date. And if you're doing standardized testing and you get accommodations in the high school, they are both, the SAT and the ACT are supposed to give students accommodations for their testing, and that not only ACT and SAT, but AP testing, PSAT, things like that. You have to go through your school guidance counselor to get that all set up, and you have to make sure that you're, like if you say, oh, my child has ADHD and it's a note from the doctor, that doesn't count. They want full-on neuropsych reports and things like that, and colleges are going to require that too. The student will need to learn how to advocate for themselves. Parents can't advocate in college at all. And again, everything has to be documented. But what I always say is you can kind of get a sense when you're looking at colleges as to how good of a job they are at supporting students who might need accommodations or have learning differences, or I remember working with a student who was legally blind, and we really had to be careful because not everybody could accommodate her. Like UW, they do a really good job. Central does a really good job. Gonzaga does a really good job, but that should be part of your research, is just first looking at their website and getting a sense for again, there's usually a tone. You can kind of tell like, oh, we welcome, we're here to help. In other words, where they go, yeah, well, I remember a friend of mine's son is autistic, and he needed accommodations a lot. And he was the two schools he was deciding between were Texas A&M and UT Austin. And I didn't work with him on the process, but she was asking my opinion. And I said, well, I can tell you what, if you send him to UT Austin, he's likely not going to be successful, because their website basically said, good luck to you. Whereas Texas A&M was like, these are all the things that we can do, and we welcome students and all that stuff. So that'll give you a good sense. But then when you're actually visiting colleges and doing your research, you should visit the disability services department and set up a meeting, because if your child's not going to be comfortable, it's like, oh my God, the person's a jerk, I'm never going to talk to them. Well, you don't want them to go there, because if they're not able to go, if they don't like the person, or they're not able to advocate for themselves, that's an important part of the process. So that's kind of my rules on there. High school credits. I don't know what you mean, high school credits. How will it help in admission? I don't know what you're asking. How do we manage the college fee? Again, college is expensive. I'm not saying anything about that. They can offer student loans. Again, as I said, 2 weeks ago, I did a talk with Peg Keogh. It's on the lwsf.org website, called Understanding the Cost, College Costs and How to Pay Less. It's a very informative webinar. So if you want more information, but that's where, yes, you might qualify for need-based aid. I am not a financial planning college counselor. But that's where, for a lot of students, I say, go to community college. They've got great, you can go to Lake Washington Institute of Technology and get, degrees in engineering and computer science and design and nursing, and they have all these great programs. Yes, you're not going to have a football team to cheer on, and there's no Greek life and stuff like that, but the quality of education is really strong, really wonderful. I'm actually going to do a program, I'm hoping in the wintertime, on community college and apprenticeships, because there's, like I said, there's more than one path. Not everybody wants to go to college or should go to college, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. It's about fit. Anyway, student loans can certainly be part of the process, and colleges may offer that to you, but it's a big burden, and they have to be paid off. So again, I highly recommend that you look up the webinar that we did. What do you do if you don't know what college you want to go to? A lot of kids don't know what college you want to go to. I mean, if you're a senior, that could be a little bit of a different question than if you're a 10th grader or junior. But, think about, and again, there'll be more in-depth presentations. The College 101 goes a lot more in depth on how to create a college list, but you can ask yourself, okay, do I have a budget? And I think budget's a really good place to start, because if your parents say, okay, we have $20,000 for 4 years put aside, and that's it. Okay, you're going to, in-state's likely going to be what you're going to need to do. Or, are there programs that you're interested in? Or how far from home do you want to be? What kind of weather do you like? Do you want sports? Do you like to be in a city? Do you like to be, in more, nature? Like, and just start filtering it down. And that's a good way to, that's how I talk to students and ask them questions, things like that, to start narrowing down, the suggestions. What are rigor classes? They are classes that are higher academics than normal classes. So it's, AP classes, it can be honors classes, it can be IB classes. Again, it depends on the high school. So, like my son did not like history, he did not like English, so he would take regular classes. He would take, LASS junior year, you just take the regular English classes and social studies, because he didn't like, but he really liked math and science. So he would take AP Chem, and he'd take AP Physics, and he'd take AP Calc and AP Calc PC, so those are the rigor classes. They're just higher than what the normal normal classes are. And again, yes, colleges like to see them, but students don't need to be taking all of them because that doesn't give them time for activities then. Okay, so after a student graduates from high school, if they attend and graduate from a community college, what do they need to apply? So, so first of all, a student, you don't have to complete an associate's degree at a community college. It's a good thing to do, you know, especially like let's say you're somebody who wants to do computer science at UW, but you just don't have the grades to get in, you know, as a freshman, or, you know, or you tried and you're like, okay, so maybe you go to community college and you can, you know, and they'll work with students. Or you can say, okay, my goal is to apply to UW, you know, computer science. I'm going to get my associate's degree. And again, because in the state schools like UW and Washington State, and, you know, the 6 public schools, they have what's called matriculation agreements with the community colleges. So a student who gets their associate's degree from one of the Washington State community colleges and then applies to so you apply as a transfer student. And again, depending on the school, you know, like a school like Washington State, they don't, you know, you just apply and you send your transcript from community college and things like that. UW, it's a little bit more involved. There's essays and things that a student has to write, but they complete the application, deadlines are posted and all that kind of stuff. But like with computer science, UW, and by the way, UW has a fabulous website. I like, they put everything out there, and they say on their website, we admit half of the cohort, you know, so the graduating class of computer science, half of it gets filled with freshmen. And that's what they say on the website. Hey, you don't get into computer science as a freshman, you're not getting in. It's pretty much never going to happen. And they say that, and you should, and that's why students should have a balanced college list and have other choices if they don't get into UW or other possible majors that they want to get into. Anyways, and then the other half of that cohort is going to be filled with mostly community college students who transfer in with their associate's degree. And sometimes I'll have students say, oh, okay, I'm going to go to UW Bothell, and then I'm going to transfer to UW Seattle. And I always go, no, don't do that. And UW will tell you, no, we give preference to the community college students. My husband always laughs. He's like, man, that community college path is so good. Now, you have to do really, really well. I mean, you need to pretty much get all A's at community college and do lots of extracurricular activities, or have a, you know, again, you have to prove that you deserve a spot in that computer science program. So the same rules apply, but it can be a great way to get in. So and again, depending on the community college, a lot of them have direct transfer agreements. So like at Lake Washington Tech, they have an engineering program, and students get their associate's degree, and it's designed to be a direct transfer agreement to go into to transfer into an existing 4-year program. So they do all the prerequisites, all the classes, so that when those students get into UW engineering or Washington State engineering or wherever it is, they have done everything that, you know, that they're supposed to do. They've taken the right classes, and it is a qualified direct transfer, because they have all the classes listed. They say these are the classes you need to take in order to qualify as a, you know, an engineering. You've got your engineering associate's degree to transfer into a 4-year college. So again, I'm not an expert in them, but I've worked enough with them. I just think the community colleges have got lots of benefits. Again, so part of the handout's just going to be a list of the high school timeline. Remember, 9th graders, do well in your classes, take classes of rigor where appropriate, and find some activities. Again, they don't have to be organized activities. Find things that you enjoy. You know, don't just be sitting in your bedroom playing video games. Do other things. Running Start versus AP, which is more rigorous, AP. And it's because AP is so structured. Okay, a college knows what is covered in an AP calculus class, and the student takes the test, and they know what a 3 means and a 4 means and a 5 means, versus if you're applying to a college, let's say in Florida, and they're like, oh, he took this math 202 at some place called Bellevue College. They don't know what that is. Again, UW knows what that is because they work with so many Running Start students, but from a rigor standpoint, AP is certainly considered more rigorous than Running Start. Do colleges outside of Washington State? Well, it's not so much a preference. I mean, the students should do whatever is right for them. Okay. The UCs, they know what Running Start is. A lot of colleges, again, on the West Coast, they know what Running Start is. And that, again, that can be part of your research. Reach out to admissions. Hey, I'm doing Running Start. How do you handle it? Do you like Running Start? Blah, blah, blah. And just ask those questions, because it's going to depend on the college. I don't honestly know, how many Running Start students get into a school like Stanford, but I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. But there's a lot of benefits to Running Start. Getting those college credits, you can save a lot of money. A lot of kids don't like high school. They don't like taking a year of chemistry, but they can take chemistry in 10 weeks. And that's the equivalent of 1 year of high school. So it gives students lots of variety. They only take 3 classes a quarter. Most kids, their grades typically improve because they've got time. I've had kids who they can have part-time jobs. They can do other activities that they really enjoy. Again, but then there's other kids who, if you took the social part of high school away, they wouldn't like it because they enjoy high school. So Running Start is a good option for students, but it's not, remember, this is not one size fits all. It's whatever is right for the student. How do I show my, so I haven't worked with a ton of Cambridge kids. In the last couple of years, there haven't been any test scores to show because they canceled the test. But on the application platforms, they say, do you have test scores to submit? And one of them is Cambridge, and just like it would be for IB or AP, and you would say yes, and then you just list them. And then typically with test scores, you self-report them. Like for AP scores, you self-report them. And then once you've decided what college you're going to go to, then you have your official scores submitted. And again, just like with AP scores, like there are some colleges that will give credit for a 3, and then there's other colleges that say no, if it's not at least it's got to be a 5 or it's got to be a 4. So it's going to depend on the schools, but you'll be able to report them on your college application. Let's see. I think that's everything. All right. Well, that's been a lot. You guys had a lot of very good questions. As I said, the Lake Washington Schools Foundation will send out the recording. There will be handouts. And anytime, feel free to reach out at findyourfit@lwsf.org. I'll be doing a more in-depth, the College 101 type thing, and we always do a boot camp, and we do a number of programs. But on their website, there are the recordings of previous programs that we've done. We've done them on standardized testing, and we did one last spring on international colleges. If there's students who are interested in applying to school in the UK or Canada and stuff like that. So there's lots of good information on there, and I appreciate everybody being there tonight. So have a good night.